He was crying in despair at the cemetery, convinced that he had lost everything forever, when suddenly he heard a voice behind him that would change his life forever. "It's me, my love. I'm here." What happened next would shock everyone who learned the truth. Ricardo Montenegro had never imagined that his life could turn into a nightmare in a single moment. He was a successful businessman in the construction industry and had everything most men could only dream of: a thriving company, a mansion in one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in the city, and expensive imported cars parked in his garage. But none of it mattered anymore. Not since Elena disappeared from his life. On the morning that changed everything, Ricardo woke alone in the bed he had shared with the love of his life for more than 2 decades. Elena's side was cold. That had become normal lately, because she often woke early to take long morning walks. But that morning, something felt different. There was a strange tension in the air that Ricardo could not explain. Elena had always been everything to him. They had been married for 23 years, and she was the one person capable of calming him whenever life or business became overwhelming. Educated in administration and naturally intelligent, she had helped him make some of the most important decisions in his company. But during the previous weeks, Elena had changed. She seemed nervous. She constantly checked over her shoulder, as if someone were following her. Sometimes Ricardo saw her urgently searching for something on her phone or speaking in a low voice during mysterious calls. "Is everything all right, my love?" he would ask. "Yes, everything is fine," Elena would answer. But her smile never reached her eyes. "It's just a few problems with the volunteer work." Elena coordinated a social project in one of the poorest areas of the city. She organized food deliveries, arranged free medical consultations, and helped children who had nowhere else to go. She was kindness in human form. That was why Ricardo never imagined that her unusual behavior could be connected to something far more dangerous. On that terrible morning, Elena left a note in the kitchen. "My love, I need to deal with something urgent. I'll be back soon. I love you." The words were simple, but they carried a meaning Ricardo would understand only much later. Elena took the car and left after blowing him a kiss. Hours passed slowly. Ricardo tried calling her several times. Her phone was out of service. That was strange. Elena always answered him. It was almost an unspoken promise between them. No matter what she was doing, if Ricardo called, she picked up. At 3 in the afternoon, his phone finally rang. Ricardo answered immediately, hoping it was Elena calling to explain why she was late. Instead, an unfamiliar voice destroyed his world. "Mr. Montenegro? This is St. Raphael Hospital. You need to come here immediately. There has been an accident on the highway." The rest of the conversation disappeared beneath the roar of panic in Ricardo's head. He raced toward the hospital with his heart pounding, praying desperately that someone had made a mistake. Maybe Elena was fine. Maybe they would go home together and later laugh about how badly the situation had frightened them. But when Ricardo arrived at the hospital, reality was far crueler than anything he had imagined. Elena's car had overturned on the road before catching fire. The firefighters had found the vehicle almost completely destroyed. According to the doctors, there was no possible way anyone could have survived. "We are terribly sorry, Mr. Montenegro," one physician told him in a heavy voice. "We couldn't save her. There was almost nothing recognizable left. We were only able to confirm her identity from the documents found in her purse." Ricardo collapsed. He literally fell to his knees in the hospital corridor. His mind refused to accept that Elena was gone forever. More than 20 years of marriage. A lifetime built together. Shared dreams. Promises. Plans. Everything had disappeared in seconds. The funeral was devastating. Ricardo could not stop crying. Friends, relatives, and employees from the company tried to comfort him, but nothing could reach him. How was he supposed to live without Elena? How was he supposed to wake every morning knowing that she would never be there again? Because of the condition of the remains after the accident, the coffin remained sealed. Ricardo held the only object that had supposedly survived the crash: Elena's wedding ring. The metal had been scorched by the fire, but it was still recognizable. It was almost all he had left of the woman he loved. During the funeral, something strange happened. Ricardo could have sworn that he saw a woman watching the ceremony from a distance. She wore dark glasses and a scarf covering much of her face. She stayed far from everyone else. For one impossible second, Ricardo's heart leaped. Her figure reminded him of Elena. The way she stood, the way she moved. Even her posture seemed familiar. But when he tried to approach her, the mysterious woman disappeared. "Grief is playing cruel tricks on me," Ricardo whispered to himself, shaking his head. The pain was making him see things that were not really there. The months that followed became the darkest period of Ricardo's life. He stopped going to the company regularly. He sank into a deep depression. The mansion where he and Elena had once lived so many happy moments became a mausoleum filled with memories. Ricardo spent hours in their bedroom holding Elena's clothes, trying to breathe in the faint traces of her perfume that still clung to the fabric. His friends begged him to seek professional help. They told him he had to try to rebuild his life. But how could he begin again when it felt as if his soul had died with Elena? How could he move forward when every room in the house seemed to whisper her name? It was Ricardo's brother, Carlos, who finally suggested visiting Elena's grave. "Maybe talking to her will bring you some peace," Carlos told him gently. "Elena would never want to see you destroying yourself like this." The cemetery of Santa Mira stood in a quiet part of the city. Elena had always said that if she ever died, she wanted to be buried somewhere beautiful, surrounded by trees and flowers. Ricardo chose a peaceful corner protected by old trees, where sunlight filtered softly through the leaves. The headstone was simple, exactly the way Elena would have wanted. White marble. Only a few words were engraved upon it.
Elena.
Beloved wife. Generous soul. Ricardo had spent hours trying to decide what to write. How could an entire life be summarized in a few lines? During his first visits, he simply stood beside the grave.
He could not speak.
The pain was too great to turn into words. Eventually, however, Ricardo began talking. He told Elena about everyday life, about the company, about decisions he still wished he could discuss with her. "I don't know how to live without you," he whispered beside the grave. "You are my compass, Elena. Without you, I'm lost." His visits slowly became sacred rituals. Every week, usually on the same day, Ricardo arrived carrying white roses, Elena's favorite flowers. He spent hours there,
talking, crying,
trying desperately to preserve the connection they had shared while she was alive. But what Ricardo did not know was that Elena was much closer than he could ever imagine. Across the city, inside a small rented house, a woman stood near a window with tears in her eyes as she watched television coverage of her own funeral. Elena was alive, very much alive, and she had terrifying reasons for faking her own death. It had begun several weeks before the accident. While working with a social project, Elena discovered evidence of a corruption network involving powerful politicians and wealthy businessmen. She uncovered documents that could destroy the careers of dangerous people. The threats began quietly. Anonymous calls, unfamiliar cars following her, messages warning her that she should start thinking about her own safety. At first, Elena tried to go to the police. Then she discovered that some members of the network had connections inside law enforcement itself. That was when she made the hardest decision of her life. She would fake her death, not only to protect herself, but to protect Ricardo as well. With the help of Dr. Augusto, a trusted physician who worked alongside her in the social project, Elena planned everything carefully. The destroyed car, the documents left behind, even the wedding ring Ricardo would later hold in his hands. Now, hidden from the world, Elena watched the man she loved slowly collapse beneath the weight of grief. Every time she saw him suffering, her own heart broke. She wanted to run to him, to tell him the truth, to hold him, to beg forgiveness for the lie. But she knew it was still too dangerous. The people who had threatened her were still searching. "Just a few more weeks," Elena whispered to herself through tears. "Only a little longer, until I have enough evidence to send these people to prison." But Elena did not realize that Ricardo was reaching his limit. During one of his next visits to the cemetery, he would make a decision that would change everything. And the reunion Elena had dreamed about for 2 years was closer than either of them knew. Fate was preparing to bring together two souls that true love had never completely separated. 2 years passed after the terrible day when Ricardo believed Elena had died. Still, he could not accept life without her. His existence had become an empty routine. He woke alone, drank coffee without appetite, pretended to work for a few hours, and almost every day ended up at Santa Mira Cemetery, speaking to a headstone that never answered him. One autumn afternoon, Ricardo arrived carrying more than white roses. He carried a decision that had been forming inside him for weeks. The heaviness in his chest had become unbearable. He no longer saw any reason to continue living without Elena. "Hello, my love," he whispered, kneeling in front of the grave. "I brought your favorite flowers again." The wind moved through the trees, creating a sad melody that seemed to echo Ricardo's grief. He carefully arranged the roses in a glass vase as he always did and sat on the damp grass. "Elena, I can't do this anymore. 2 years. I have tried to live without you for 2 years, and every day hurts more than the last. The house is empty. Business means nothing. Nothing means anything without you." What Ricardo did not know was that only a short distance away, hidden behind an enormous old tree, Elena was watching him. She came to the cemetery every week, always from a distance, always careful to make sure Ricardo never noticed her. Watching the man she loved waste away from grief had become a kind of torture. But she accepted the pain because she believed it kept him safe. Elena had changed physically during those 2 years. Her once long brown hair was now short and dyed blonde. She wore glasses she did not actually need and clothes completely different from her former style. The transformation was necessary to avoid recognition. But every time she looked into the mirror, she was reminded of the life she had abandoned. "Ricardo, my love," she whispered, gripping the tree so she would not run toward him. "If only you knew how badly I want to be there beside you." Ricardo continued speaking to the grave. "Do you remember when we bought the house? You said it would be ours forever. You said we would grow old together on the veranda while watching our grandchildren play in the garden." His voice broke. Elena covered her mouth with her hand to stop herself from crying aloud. They truly had planned an entire life together. Children, trips, ordinary mornings, small moments that made existence beautiful. "Today I went to the doctor," Ricardo continued weakly. "He said my blood pressure is too high. He told me I need to take better care of myself." Ricardo gave a bitter laugh. "But why, Elena? Why should I protect a life that has no meaning anymore?" Elena closed her eyes as tears rolled down her face. Dr. Augusto had mentioned that Ricardo's health was getting worse, but she had never understood just how serious things had become. Her plan had been to remain hidden until she collected enough evidence to prosecute the people who threatened her. But seeing Ricardo slowly destroy himself was becoming unbearable. Elena's phone vibrated. A message from Dr. Augusto appeared on the screen. "Situation is complicated. They are searching again. Suspicious activity near your old workplace. Stay hidden." Elena took a deep breath. The criminals connected to the corruption network had never stopped looking for her. Powerful politicians, influential businessmen, people controlling billions through fraudulent contracts. They knew Elena possessed documents capable of destroying careers and sending important figures to prison. "Please, Ricardo," she whispered when she saw him slowly rise from the ground. "Hold on a little longer. I promise I will come back to you." Ricardo stood in front of the headstone for several minutes, as if gathering the courage to say something. When he finally spoke, Elena felt her blood turn cold. "Elena, I have made a decision."
He paused.
"I don't want to live without you anymore." Elena had to lean against the tree to keep herself from falling. "Today is our last conversation here. Tomorrow I'll be with you, wherever you are." The pain in Elena's chest became almost impossible to bear. "No, Ricardo," she whispered desperately.
"No.
"Please don't do this." Ricardo kissed the marble headstone and slowly began walking away. Every instinct in Elena screamed at her to run after him, to shout that she was there, that she was alive, that everything had been a terrible lie created to save them. But just as she took a step forward, Elena saw two men in suits entering the cemetery. Her body froze. She immediately recognized one of them.
Marco Silveira.
The right-hand man of one of the corrupt politicians Elena had been trying to expose. If they saw her, her life would be in danger. And Ricardo would become a target as well. Elena pressed herself behind the tree. The two men slowly walked through the cemetery, searching carefully. Eventually, they stopped beside the same grave where Ricardo had been moments earlier. "Are you sure she comes here?" one man asked. "Our source said a woman matching Elena's description has been seen in this area several times. Always on Wednesdays. Always near this grave." Elena's heart began racing. They knew. Not only had they discovered that she was alive, they had learned her routine. "How is that possible?" the second man muttered. "She was smarter than we thought. Everyone makes mistakes. Eventually she'll make another one, and when she does, we'll be waiting." The men remained in the cemetery for nearly 20 minutes, checking trees, pathways, and possible hiding places. Elena stayed completely still. She barely dared to breathe. If they found her there, everything would be over. After the men finally left, Elena remained hidden for another hour before moving. Her legs shook. Not only from fear, from desperation. Ricardo had spoken about giving up on life. And Elena could not stop him without risking both of them. She called Dr. Augusto. "Doctor, they were here. At the cemetery. They know I'm alive." "Elena, where are you now?" "I'm heading back to the safe apartment. But doctor, Ricardo is sick. Worse than I realized. Today he talked about joining me." Dr. Augusto was silent for several seconds. "Elena, maybe it is time to consider another approach." "What kind of approach?" "I've spoken to a prosecutor I trust completely. Someone outside the corrupt network. We may finally be able to expose them without leaving you defenseless. But we need your official cooperation." "And Ricardo? Will he be safe?" "If we arrest the people responsible, yes. But it is risky. You would have to come out of hiding." Elena looked back toward the grave where she had spent 2 years crying in silence. She thought about Ricardo alone in that enormous mansion, about the hopeless words he had just spoken. "How much time would you need?"
A week.
"Maybe 2. "Ricardo doesn't have 2 weeks, Elena replied. "He'll do something terrible before then.
And
I need to show myself to him. I need him to know I'm alive without revealing where I'm staying. That could be extremely dangerous. It's even more dangerous to let Ricardo believe he has nothing left to live for." Elena ended the call knowing she had made her decision. She could no longer stay hidden while the man she loved destroyed himself. She had to find a way to show Ricardo that she was alive. But what Elena did not know was that the people hunting her knew far more than she imagined. And the next encounter at Santa Mira Cemetery would be far more dangerous than either of them could predict. That night, Elena barely slept. She sat at the small kitchen table in the apartment where she had been hiding and reviewed the plan that could save Ricardo or destroy both of them. Dozens of documents lay across the table. They told the true story of everything Elena had endured during the previous 2 years. "Why did I wait so long?" she whispered. The answer frightened her. What had started as a simple investigation into inflated public contracts had turned into something monstrous. The corruption network did not involve only 1 or 2 local politicians. It stretched across the country. Billions were being moved through fraudulent contracts. The network reached ministries and powerful government offices throughout Brazil. "Every time I thought I had discovered everything," Elena whispered, "I found another layer underneath." Dr. Augusto had explained the danger only a few weeks earlier. "Elena, you have no idea what we've uncovered. These people aren't simply stealing public money. They kill anyone who threatens them. 3 journalists, 2 auditors, and a prosecutor have already disappeared over the last few years." That was why Elena had remained hidden for so long. Every month revealed more crimes, more people involved, more reasons to fear for her life and Ricardo's. But now Ricardo was standing on the edge of complete despair. Elena knew she had to act. She picked up an old photograph she had kept hidden inside her wallet. It showed her wedding day with Ricardo 23 years earlier. Elena wore a white gown. Ricardo looked elegant in a black tuxedo. Both smiled as though the entire world belonged to them. Do you remember what you promised me that day? Elena whispered to the photograph. She had been 25. Ricardo had been 28. Rain had fallen throughout the morning.
Everyone said it was a bad sign.
Yet just before they met at the altar inside the small church, the rain suddenly stopped. It had felt almost magical. Elena Cristina da Silva, Ricardo had said while holding her hands, I promise to love you every day of our lives. In happiness and sorrow, in health and sickness, when you smile and when you cry, until death separates us. The priest smiled. And if even death cannot separate you? Ricardo looked deeply into Elena's eyes. Then I'll keep loving her beyond death, because what I feel for her is stronger than anything else. Elena had started crying in front of their families and guests. I promise the same, she answered. If life ever tries to separate us, I will fight until my last breath to come back to you. And I'll wait, Ricardo whispered, no matter how long it takes. Back in the apartment, Elena wiped the tears from her face. I'm coming back now, my love. At 2 o'clock the following afternoon, Elena arrived at Santa Mira Cemetery. Ricardo usually visited at 3, so she expected to have enough time to find a safe place and prepare herself. But as Elena approached the section where she had officially been buried, she suddenly stopped. Ricardo was already there. And he was not alone. 3 men stood beside him. Elena immediately recognized 2 of them, Marco Silveira and Joaquim Costa, members of the corruption network. The third was an older, well-dressed man Elena had never seen before. Mr. Montenegro, the older man was saying, we understand your pain. Losing a wife is one of the hardest things a man can experience. Ricardo looked suspiciously at the group.
Who are you?
What do you want from me? My name is Dr. Romario. I'm an attorney, and I have information about your wife that may be extremely interesting to you. Elena's heart began pounding. How did they know Ricardo would be there? What information were they planning to reveal? What information? Ricardo demanded, his voice trembling. Dr. Romario smiled. Mr. Montenegro, do you truly believe your wife is dead? The question struck Ricardo like lightning. His face went pale. What are you talking about? I saw the wreck. I attended her funeral. You saw exactly what someone wanted you to see. The lawyer leaned closer. Your wife may very well still be alive. Ricardo staggered and grabbed the headstone for support. That's impossible. Elena covered her mouth to stop herself from crying out. The criminals were using Ricardo's grief against him. They were manipulating his hope to find her. Your wife was investigating irregularities involving government contracts, Marco Silveira said. Extremely valuable information. If she really faked her death, she may have hidden evidence somewhere. You're insane, Ricardo replied. But Elena could see doubt entering his expression. Elena would never do something like that to me. Wouldn't she? Dr. Romario took an envelope from his jacket. Then perhaps you can explain these. He showed Ricardo several photographs. Elena could not see every image clearly from where she stood. But she saw Ricardo's face change completely. Where did you get these? Security cameras. Your wife has been seen in different areas of the city. Always disguised. Always careful. But not careful enough. Elena's stomach dropped. The photographs were real. Somehow, they had captured images of her while she left hiding to collect evidence. How could she have been so careless? Ricardo stared at the pictures, as if he were looking at a ghost. That woman looks like Elena, but the hair. Cosmetic changes can be very convincing, Mr. Montenegro, the lawyer said. No, Ricardo shook his head. Elena would never let me suffer for 2 years if she were alive. Unless she had a very serious reason, Joaquim Costa said, stepping closer. Perhaps she was protecting information capable of destroying powerful people. Ricardo dropped heavily to the ground beside the grave. The possibility that Elena had been alive all that time seemed to break him in an entirely new way. What do you want from me? He asked. We want you to help us find her. And if I refuse?
Marco Silveira smiled coldly.
You own a very successful company, Mr. Montenegro. Many employees depend on you. It would be unfortunate if something happened to your business or to the people who work for you. The threat was unmistakable. Elena felt anger burning through her chest. These men had already destroyed her life. Now they were threatening Ricardo and innocent employees. Dr. Romario handed Ricardo a business card. Think carefully. If your wife is alive, sooner or later she'll want to contact you. When that happens, call this number. Ricardo took the card with trembling fingers. You have 24 hours to process what we've told you. After that, we expect your full cooperation. The three men walked away. Elena waited until they were completely gone before leaving her hiding place. She needed to talk to Ricardo immediately. But when she approached the grave, he had disappeared. Only the business card remained on the ground. Elena picked it up. The phone number belonged to one of the most dangerous figures in the corruption network. At that moment, she knew everything had changed. This was no longer only about protecting evidence. It was about saving Ricardo before he became an innocent victim in a war Elena had begun. She called Dr. Augusto. Doctor, the plan has changed. They know I'm alive. And now Ricardo suspects it too. Elena, this is extremely dangerous. I don't care anymore. If I don't appear before Ricardo today, they'll use him to find me. And if they find me, they'll kill both of us. Elena ended the call and looked at the empty grave one last time. The place had been her emotional prison for 2 years. I'm sorry, Ricardo, she whispered. But today you're going to discover that your wife is far more alive than you ever imagined. What Elena did not know was that Ricardo was driving home at that very moment, preparing to make a decision that would change everything. The photographs would not leave Ricardo's mind. That woman truly looked like Elena. How could it be possible? No, Ricardo muttered while parking inside the garage of the empty mansion. Elena would never do this to me. But another thought followed. What if it was true? What if Elena had really been alive for 2 years? The possibility of betrayal hurt almost as much as losing her. Ricardo walked inside and went directly to their bedroom. He opened Elena's wardrobe, desperate to find something that could prove the theory impossible. That was when he noticed something unusual. A few pieces of clothing were out of place. Ricardo remembered exactly how he had left them. Someone has been here, he whispered. His heart began beating faster. Then he heard a key turning in the front door. Ricardo froze. Only 2 people had ever owned a key to that house. Himself and Elena. Slow footsteps echoed through the hallway. Ricardo walked downstairs as though trapped inside a dream. Or a nightmare. When he reached the living room, he saw a woman standing with her back toward him in the dim afternoon light.
Elena.
His voice was barely audible. The woman slowly turned. Her hair was different.
Short. Blonde.
Her appearance had changed. But those eyes... Ricardo would have recognized those eyes anywhere in the universe. Hello, my love, Elena said, her voice trembling with emotion. It's me. For several seconds, Ricardo could not move. Then all the emotions he had buried for 2 years exploded at once. Relief. Love. Disbelief.
Rage.
How could you, he shouted as tears streamed down his face. How could you make me live through this? 2 years, Elena. 2 years of hell. Elena took a step toward him. Ricardo stepped backward as if she were a ghost. Ricardo, please. Let me explain. Explain? He laughed bitterly. Explain how you let me cry over your grave every week. Explain how you watched me fall into depression and did nothing. I did it to protect you. Elena cried, finally losing control. Everything I did was to save your life. You protected my life by destroying it. Elena forced herself to breathe. Ricardo, please sit down. What I have to tell you will explain everything. I don't want to sit down. I want to understand how the woman I loved more than my own life could deceive me like this. Each word struck Elena like a knife. I never stopped loving you. Don't. Not even for 1 second. Then what kind of love is built on lie after lie?
Elena stepped closer carefully.
Do you remember our honeymoon? The little hotel where we were trapped inside because of the rain? Ricardo stopped shouting, confused by the sudden change. What does that have to do with anything? Do you remember? Of course I remember. The memory returned instantly. They were young, lying in bed while rain hit the windows. Elena had rested her head against Ricardo's chest while listening to his heartbeat. "Ricardo," she had said then, "will you promise me something? Anything. If someday I have to make an impossible decision to protect you, will you still believe in me?" Ricardo had laughed and kissed her hair. "What kind of question is that? Promise me." "Elena, I would trust you with my life. Even if it looked like I had abandoned you, you would never abandon me. And if I did, I would wait until you came back." Back in the present, Elena was crying. "I didn't abandon you, Ricardo. I never did. I stepped away because I wanted to survive long enough to come back." "Come back from what? What were you running from?" Elena opened the bag she carried and pulled out a thick folder.
This.
She placed hundreds of documents on the table. "These are the reason our lives were in danger." Ricardo picked up several pages. Contracts, invoices, bank statements, official documents. What is all this?
Corruption.
A huge network moving billions of reais. Elena explained how she had discovered irregularities while working on the social project. Food contracts for schools, medicine contracts, building materials. Prices artificially increased. Money redirected through shell companies. "At first, I thought it was local," she said. "Then I realized the same companies were connected to politicians and businessmen all over the country." "And you investigated them alone?" "At first." Ricardo looked at her in disbelief. "Until I discovered that people who tried to expose them had disappeared." Disappeared? Killed Ricardo. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't we go to the police together?" "Because I learned that some police officers were involved too." And then the threat started. "What threats?" "Anonymous calls. Cars following me. Photographs of our house sent to my phone." Ricardo stared at her in horror. "So, you decided to fake your death." "Dr. Augusto helped me." They had threatened him too after he reported suspicious activity at the hospital. "Augusto knew you were alive." "Yes." "He helped arrange the fake accident." "Yes." "The car? The documents? Everything?" "Yes." Ricardo suddenly stood. 2 years, Elena." His voice trembled. "You needed 2 years?" "Every month I discovered that the network was larger than I imagined. Politicians, senators, businessmen. It went far beyond the city." "And my suffering?"
Elena's face collapsed.
"Did that not matter?" "You mattered more than anything." "Then why?" "Because losing you alive was better than watching them kill you." Ricardo turned away. "Stop saying you did this out of love. It's the truth. You watched me mourn you." Elena went silent. Ricardo turned back. "You were there, weren't you?" She lowered her eyes. "At the cemetery?" "Yes." "All those weeks?" "Yes." Ricardo looked shattered. "I saw you crying," Elena said. "I saw you falling apart. Every time you cried, something inside me died too." "Then why didn't you come to me?" "Because they were watching. And today I found out they know I'm alive." Ricardo went pale. "The men at the cemetery. You spoke to them? They showed me photographs of you. They told me you were alive. And they threatened me." Elena's face changed instantly. "Threatened you how?" "They said if I didn't help find you, they would destroy my company and hurt my employees." Oh God. This was exactly what Elena had spent 2 years trying to prevent. At that moment, Ricardo's phone rang. He looked at the screen. "It's the number they gave me. Don't answer." The ringing stopped, then began again almost immediately. "They know you're here," Elena whispered, looking toward the windows. "They must have followed us." "Then why did you come?" Elena looked him directly in the eyes. "Because you said you were going to do something terrible. You said you wanted to join me." Ricardo froze. "You heard that?" "Yes." The phone rang for the 3rd time. Elena continued. "I would rather risk dying beside you than stay hidden knowing I had lost you forever." The words remained suspended between them. 2 years of lies.
Pain. Fear. Love.
All compressed into one sentence. Then the phone stopped ringing. This time it did not start again. Instead, They heard the sound of cars stopping in front of the mansion. Elena ran to the window and looked through the curtains. 3 black vehicles. Several men climbing out. "They're here," she whispered. Fear covered her face. "They came for us." Ricardo looked at the woman he loved. For the first time, he truly understood that everything Elena had done had been an attempt to protect him. And now it might already be too late for both of them. He took her hand for the first time in 2 years. "Whatever happens, I love you." Tears filled her eyes. "I never stopped loving you either." He squeezed her hand. "Then we fight together." Footsteps approached the front door. A hard knock echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. Ricardo and Elena exchanged a look. They both knew the next few minutes could decide whether they would live or die. "Mr. Montenegro." Dr. Romario's voice came through the wooden door. "We know your wife is inside. Make this easier for everyone." Elena tightened her grip on Ricardo. "There's a way out through the garden. You can run. I'm not leaving you again." "Ricardo, they came for me. You aren't part of this." "I am your husband. That makes me part of it." Another knock. Louder this time. 30 seconds, Mr. Montenegro. "Open the door, or we open it ourselves." Ricardo looked at Elena. A decision formed in his eyes. "Trust me this time." Before Elena could stop him, Ricardo opened the door. 6 men stood outside. Dr. Romario,
Marco Silveira. Joaquim Costa.
and 3 others Elena did not recognize. "Mr. Montenegro," Dr. Romario said with a cold smile. "How good of you to cooperate." "Come inside," Ricardo replied. "Let's settle this like civilized people." Elena stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "Ricardo, what are you doing?" "Exactly what they want." He looked at the men. Talking. The criminals spread through the living room, clearly positioning themselves to prevent escape. Dr. Romario sat in Ricardo's favorite chair as though he owned the house. "Mrs. Montenegro," he said, studying Elena. "Or should I call you Mrs. Silva, since officially you have been dead for 2 years? Say what you came here to say." "We want the documents." Elena remained calm. "What documents?"
Marco Silveira stepped closer.
"Don't play innocent. We know you photographed contracts, recorded conversations, copied files." "And if I did?" Dr. Romario rose slowly. "Then you will hand over everything. After that, you will disappear again." He smiled. This time permanently. Ricardo stepped between Elena and the men. "Listen carefully," he said. "My wife isn't giving you anything." Dr. Romario laughed. "And what exactly are you going to do to stop us?" Ricardo pulled his phone from his pocket. On the screen, a live call was active.
This.
The criminals stared at the phone. "For the last 5 minutes, every threat and every word spoken inside this room has been recorded and transmitted live to a legal office." Dr. Romario's expression changed instantly. "Turn it off." "I can't. It's automatic. The lawyer on the other end has already contacted the federal police." Elena looked at Ricardo in surprise. When had he arranged this?
Marco Silveira pulled a handgun.
Joaquim raised a hand. "Calm down." Dr. Romario tried to regain control. "Mr. Montenegro, you clearly don't understand who you're dealing with." "I understand perfectly," Ricardo said. "Criminals who steal money meant for children's hospitals, public schools, and food programs. People who take food directly from the mouths of children." Dr. Romario narrowed his eyes. "How do you know that?"
Elena stepped beside Ricardo.
"Because I told him everything." The lawyer's face became cold. "Then both of you know too much." At that moment, Ricardo's phone rang. He switched it to speaker. "Ricardo." A woman's voice filled the room. "This is Dr. Patricia Mendez with the federal police. We received your transmission. Units are already on the way." The criminals exchanged nervous looks. "How long?" Ricardo asked. 3 minutes.
Marco Silveira panicked.
3 minutes is enough to finish this. "Marco," Dr. Romario warned him. "Don't be stupid." But Marco was losing control. "These 2 will destroy everything we built." He pointed the gun at Elena. "Where are the documents?" Elena raised her chin. "Even if I knew, I would never tell you."
Marco smiled darkly.
"What if I point the gun at your husband instead?" He turned the weapon toward Ricardo.
Elena froze. No.
Then tell me where the files are. Elena looked at Ricardo. He shook his head almost imperceptibly. Do not give in. The documents, Elena said slowly. They are. A distant siren interrupted her. Dr. Romario looked toward the window. Flashing lights were approaching the property. They're early. Marco began panicking. We won't get out. We can still negotiate, the lawyer replied. Negotiate. Ricardo laughed bitterly. With whom? You just confessed to major crimes during a live recording. Reality struck the criminals all at once. They were surrounded, recorded,
Trapped.
Dr. Romario pulled a revolver from inside his jacket. If we go down, we aren't going alone. Elena stepped in front of Ricardo. If you want to shoot someone, shoot me. This started with me. Elena, no. Ricardo pulled her behind him. If you shoot anyone, shoot me. How touching, Dr. Romario mocked. A competition over who dies first. The sirens were now directly outside. Vehicles stopped sharply in front of the mansion. Federal police, a voice shouted. The house is surrounded. Come out with your hands raised. Dr. Romario looked around, desperately calculating his options. There was no escape. Mrs. Montenegro, he said, lowering the gun slightly. Last chance. The documents in exchange for your lives. Elena looked into Ricardo's eyes. She saw every year they had shared, every promise, every dream they still hoped to fulfill. There's something you never understood, Elena said calmly. The documents were never with me. The room became completely silent. What? Ricardo smiled for the first time. The files have been in the hands of the federal police for a week. Dr. Romario went pale.
Impossible.
Dr. Augusto delivered them once we discovered you knew Elena was alive. Marco Silveira lost control. Then why didn't the police arrest us earlier? Because they wanted your confession, Elena replied. They needed you speaking openly in front of witnesses. Joaquim Costa dropped his weapon. We walked into a trap. Exactly. A new voice came from the entrance. Dr. Patricia Mendez appeared with a team of federal agents. It was a very good trap. Dr. Romario still pointed the revolver toward the couple. If that's true, at least I'm taking you with me. No, you aren't, Patricia said calmly. Your revolver is empty. Romario stared at the weapon.
What?
He pulled the trigger.
Click.
Nothing.
How?
Dr. Augusto told us you always carry the same weapon. We made sure it was harmless before tonight. The criminals were stunned. Everyone on the floor. Agents shouted. Hands behind your heads. Within minutes, Dr. Romario, Marco Silveira, Joaquim Costa, and the others were handcuffed and escorted outside. Ricardo and Elena remained standing in the center of the room, holding each other. The nightmare was finally ending. How did you know this would work? Elena asked, still trembling. I didn't, Ricardo admitted. I only knew I couldn't lose you again. Dr. Patricia approached them. Mr. and Mrs. Montenegro, what you did was extremely courageous. Thanks to your evidence and tonight's operation, we have dismantled one of the largest corruption networks we've investigated in years.
Elena swallowed.
Are we safe now? With the recordings, the evidence, and the arrests made tonight, the people responsible will spend a very long time behind bars. Ricardo looked at Elena. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe the nightmare was truly over. So, I can officially become Elena again? She asked with a tearful smile. You can officially return to your life, Patricia replied. Elena looked at Ricardo. And I can finally come home. They embraced. The hug carried 2 years of grief,
Fear.
suppressed love, and the hope of a new beginning. But when they pulled apart, Elena noticed something in Ricardo's eyes. Love was there, relief too, but so was pain. A scar. What is it? She asked. Ricardo hesitated. These 2 years changed us. How do we rebuild everything we lost? Elena understood then that defeating the criminals had only been the first battle. Now came the harder challenge, rebuilding the heart of the man she had hurt while trying to save him. The next morning, silence filled the Montenegro mansion. Elena had slept in the guest bedroom, respecting Ricardo's need for space. Ricardo spent most of the night awake in the living room, staring through the window. He was trying to reconcile two versions of the same woman. The Elena he had loved for 23 years, and the Elena who had disappeared for 2. Ricardo. Her soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. May I come in? She stood in the doorway, wearing one of the old outfits she had left behind. She looked familiar. And unfamiliar. Of course, Ricardo said without looking directly at her. It's still your home. The coldness in his voice hurt. Can we talk? About what? About how you're a hero who saved the country from corruption. About how I should thank you for protecting me. About how you feel. Elena sat in the chair across from him. Ricardo finally looked at her. How do I feel? Confused. Furious. Relieved. Broken. All at the same time. He stood. Can you imagine what it was like to discover my wife was alive after I spent 2 years crying over her grave? To realize every tear I shed was seen by you while you were hiding behind some tree? Elena lowered her eyes. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Was it really harder than letting me believe I had lost the only reason I had to live? I thought I was protecting you. Ricardo turned sharply. Stop using that as an excuse. Elena looked up. You made a choice. You trusted strangers more than you trusted me. That isn't true. Yes, it is. You trusted Dr. Augusto. You trusted the federal police. You trusted everyone involved in that operation. His voice cracked. But you didn't trust your own husband enough to tell him the truth. The words struck Elena painfully because she knew part of them was true. You're right, she whispered. Ricardo stopped pacing. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid you would look at me the way you're looking at me now. With anger. With disappointment. Like I'm a stranger. Elena, you faked your death for 2 years. What reaction did you expect? Before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Ricardo looked through the window. Carlos stood outside. It's my brother.
Elena tensed.
Maybe you should stay here.
Why?
Because he cried almost as much as I did at your funeral. I don't know how he'll react when he sees you alive. Ricardo opened the door. Carlos walked inside, while talking. Ricardo, I saw the news about the federal police operation. They said they arrested a criminal network in our region, and... He stopped in the middle of the sentence. Elena stood in the living room. Carlos stared at her.
Shock.
Confusion. Relief. Anger. Every emotion passed across his face.
Elena.
His voice sounded as though he were looking at a ghost. Hello, Carlos. He looked at Ricardo. Then Elena. Then Ricardo again. Someone needs to tell me what the hell is going on. Sit down, Ricardo said. It's a long story. Over the next 15 minutes, Ricardo explained everything. Carlos listened in silence. His expression became more serious with every revelation. When Ricardo finished, Carlos stood and walked toward Elena. For 1 second, she thought he might hug her. Instead, he shook his head. Elena, do you understand what you did to this family? Carlos sighed.
No.
Let me speak. He pointed toward Ricardo. My brother fell into depression. He stopped eating properly. He stopped working. He almost sold the company. Elena looked at Ricardo in horror. You were going to sell Montenegro Construction? What was the point of owning a company if you weren't there to share any of it with me? Ricardo answered quietly. Carlos continued. I spent 2 years begging my brother to get psychological help. He lost 15 kilograms, Elena. Elena began to cry. 15 kilograms from grief. Carlos, I'm sorry. And the employees, Carlos continued. 120 families depend on this company. They almost lost their jobs because their boss was destroyed. Elena covered her mouth. I didn't know it was that bad. How could you not know? Carlos snapped. You went to the cemetery. You saw him. I thought he would recover. Recover? From 23 years of marriage? From believing the love of his life had died. Enough, Ricardo finally said, stepping between them. She understands. Carlos looked at him in disbelief. She understands? Yes. You were ready to die yesterday, and today she appears again, and suddenly everything is fine? It isn't fine, Elena whispered. Nothing is fine. Carlos turned toward her. At least you understand that. Elena wiped her tears. Carlos, there is something neither of you knows. Both brothers looked at her. Not even Ricardo. Ricardo's face tightened. When I faked my death, Elena said slowly, I was pregnant. The room became completely silent. Ricardo went pale. What? 2 months. His lips trembled. You were pregnant? Yes. Elena started crying harder. I lost the baby 3 weeks later. The stress. The fear. Hiding. Everything. Carlos sat down heavily. Ricardo remained standing. Frozen. That's why I waited even longer before coming back, Elena explained. It wasn't only because I was afraid of the criminals. I couldn't face the guilt of losing our child because of my decision. Our child. Ricardo repeated the words almost mechanically. I was going to tell you the day after the accident, Elena said. I had even bought a tiny baby shoe as a surprise. Ricardo slowly approached her. Where is it? Elena reached into her bag and removed a small box. Inside was a tiny blue baby shoe. Beside it was a note. For the most amazing dad in the world. Ricardo picked it up with trembling hands. Carlos began crying silently.
Elena, Ricardo said it.
Why didn't you tell me this yesterday? Because I had already hurt you enough. I didn't want to place another burden on you, but it wasn't my fault. It was mine.
No.
If I had trusted you from the beginning, maybe our son would be here now. The revelation changed everything in the room. Carlos stood and finally embraced Elena. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know you had gone through that alone. You don't need to apologize, Elena replied. Everything you said was true. Ricardo still held the tiny shoe. How did you survive all of that alone? I didn't. Elena looked at him. That's why I kept delaying my return. I needed the strength to face everything I had lost. Ricardo met her eyes. For the first time since the previous night, his anger softened. Elena, we lost more than time. I know. We lost our son. I know. And I'll carry that pain for the rest of my life. Ricardo stepped closer. Not alone. She looked at him in surprise. We'll carry it together. How can you forgive me after everything? Ricardo held her face gently in both hands. Because now I understand that you suffered too. Maybe as much as I did. Maybe more. That doesn't erase what I did.
No.
It doesn't. He looked at her carefully. But it helps me understand it. And it reminds me that the woman I love is still there beneath all this pain. Elena collapsed into his arms. This time Ricardo did not hesitate. He held her completely. They cried together for everything they had lost during those 2 years. When they finally pulled apart, Elena saw something new in his eyes.
Love.
The beginning of forgiveness. But also a wound that might never disappear completely. Ricardo, she whispered, how do we rebuild this? How do we become us again? He answered with painful honesty. I don't know if we can ever become exactly who we were before. Elena's face fell. Maybe we need to learn how to be different people. People who know both what love can survive and what love can destroy.
Elena understood.
Winning back Ricardo's heart would be a longer journey than she had imagined. 6 months passed.
Spring arrived.
And with it came a new beginning. The atmosphere inside Montenegro Construction was completely different from what it had been during Ricardo's years of grief. Ricardo was sitting in his office when Elena entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. She had returned to the company as a consultant for social and ethical projects. Her job was to ensure that all contracts were transparent.
Clean.
Legal. How did the meeting with the investors go? Elena asked. Very well. Ricardo accepted the coffee. They loved the new housing project, 500 affordable homes, with full transparency in every contract.
Elena smiled.
And the employees? Ricardo looked through the window toward the busy company yard. You want to talk to them with me? Elena knew what he meant. Today? He nodded. It's time. They had decided to tell all 120 employees the full truth. Everyone gathered inside the company's main hall. Dona Maria, who had worked in cleaning for 15 years. SCU Joaquim from security, who had known Ricardo since childhood. Pedrinho from the warehouse, who had cried at Elena's funeral as if she were family. Ricardo stood before them. You all know the last 2 years were extremely difficult for this company. Quiet murmurs moved through the hall. Everyone remembered what Ricardo had become after losing his wife. Today, Ricardo continued, Elena, and I want to tell you the truth about what happened. Elena stepped forward. Good afternoon. The room became silent. Some employees were seeing Elena for the first time since the truth about her survival became public. Several cried. Others simply stared. I know my return has created confusion, Elena said. And all of you deserve to understand why I disappeared from your lives. For the next 20 minutes, Elena explained everything. The investigation, the corruption, the threats, the fake accident, 2 years in hiding. She did not hide the consequences of her decision either. I almost destroyed the company you built with us, Elena said as tears rolled down her face. I almost took jobs away from 120 families because I believed I was protecting one person. Donna Maria slowly stood from her chair. Donna Elena, she said gently, you did what you thought was right at the time. I was wrong, Donna Maria. We all make mistakes, my child. What matters is learning from them. Pedrinho stood too. We understand you were trying to protect the boss. Love sometimes makes people do crazy things. Those simple words touched Elena more deeply than any formal speech could. These were real people, real families, people whose lives depended on the company. Ricardo stepped forward. That's why we've decided to create an employee protection fund. If this company ever faces another crisis, every employee will receive guaranteed salary support for an entire year. Elena continued. And we are also introducing a profit-sharing program. She looked around the room. Because you are more than employees. You are family. The hall erupted in applause. Donna Maria walked forward and wrapped Elena in a powerful hug. Welcome home, my daughter, she whispered. We missed you. After the meeting, Ricardo and Elena walked into the small garden behind the company. Elena had created it years earlier. There was a bench under a tree where they used to sit and discuss projects. How do you feel? Ricardo asked.
Relieved.
Frightened. Grateful. And you? Ricardo remained silent for a moment, looking at flowers Elena had planted years ago. They had continued growing even while she was gone. You know what I learned during these 6 months?
What?
That true love isn't about never hurting the person you love. Elena looked at him. It's about learning how to heal each other after the wound. She was surprised by his words. You hurt me, Elena, deeper than physical pain ever could. Her eyes filled with tears. But you also showed me what our love is capable of.
How?
You risked everything to protect me. Ricardo smiled sadly. And I had to risk opening my heart again in order to forgive you. Elena took his hand. But how do we know we won't hurt each other again? We don't. He smiled. Maybe we will hurt each other in different ways someday. But now we know our love is strong enough to survive even our worst decisions. Elena reached into her bag. I have something for you. She gave him a small box. Ricardo opened it. Inside were 2 new wedding rings. They were different from the original ones, but just as beautiful. Why new rings? Because the old ones represent who we were before. Elena looked at him lovingly. These represent who we became after everything we survived. Ricardo lifted one of the rings. An inscription had been engraved inside. Love reborn.
Eh?
She smiled through her tears. Will you marry me again? Ricardo laughed softly. I want to marry the woman you are now. The woman brave enough to sacrifice everything for love and humble enough to admit when she was wrong. And I want to marry the man you became, the man who learned how to forgive. They exchanged rings there in the company garden. No large party, no crowd, no public celebration, only flowers, the tree above them,
And a new promise.
From now on, they would face everything together. Ricardo, Elena whispered, thank you for giving me a second chance. And thank you for teaching me what a second chance really means. What does it mean? It doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means building a better future with everything the past taught us. 6 months later, Ricardo and Elena returned to Santa Mira Cemetery. But this time they were not two people separated by grief. They arrived together, hand in hand, carrying white roses. They stood in front of the grave that had once been Elena's official resting place. "It's strange," Elena said while arranging the flowers. "Visiting my own grave." Ricardo smiled gently. "It isn't your grave anymore." "Then whose is it?" "The woman you used to be." Elena looked at him. "The woman who is too afraid to trust completely." "And what else is buried here?" "Our fear." Ricardo touched the headstone. "Our mistakes. The pain we created unnecessarily. The years we lost because of fear and pride." They had replaced the old inscription. Now the white marble read, "Here rest the fears that almost destroyed a true love." Ricardo looked at the words. "Whenever I come here now, I won't cry because I lost you." He took Elena's hand. "I'll be grateful because I found you again." They walked back toward their car together, leaving behind not only a grave, but the version of themselves that no longer existed. Later, when they arrived home, Elena stopped at the doorway. "Ricardo." "Yes. There's one question I never asked you." "What is it?" "If you had known everything from the beginning, the threats, the documents, the danger, would you have allowed me to leave to protect you?" Ricardo looked deeply into her eyes.
No. Elena waited.
"I would have insisted that we face it together, even knowing we could both have been hurt?" "Yes." He took both of her hands. "Elena, true love is not avoiding storms." He smiled. "It is learning how to dance in the rain, knowing that whatever happens, you will still be together when the sun comes out again." They walked into the house side by side, and they finally understood one of the most valuable lessons two people could ever learn together. True love is not perfect, but it can survive. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting what happened. It means choosing to build something new from the pieces of what was broken. And sometimes the greatest proof of love is not promising that you will never leave. Sometimes it is knowing how to find your way back home.